Login details.
It's going live. You're live. Let me double check. Yes, we are live.
Trustee DiCarlo, we're live.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us. Before we get started, we need to go through a formal roll call. And Dr. Green, would you take us through that roll call, please?
Yes. Chairman DiCarlo, because trustees are participating remotely by electronic means, I must run through a series of questions before calling roll. Additionally, because we have trustees participating remotely, should any votes be taken, they must be taken by roll call. Members of the Finance and Administration Committee, in accordance with Tennessee Code 844-108, Section C3, I have two questions to ask those of you who are participating remotely, if you could answer for the record as the roll is called. First, are you able to clearly hear us so that you can participate in this meeting? And can you please identify any persons present with you in the room from which you are participating in this meeting? I'll proceed with the roll call. Trustee Allen? Trustee Grisham?
Present.
Are you able to hear us, Trustee Grisham?
I hear you very well, and no one's in my home but me.
Trustee Latimer? Trustee Ramsey?
Here.
Are you able to hear us? And are there others in the room?
I am very well, and no one else is with me.
Trustee Latimer? See that Trustee Latimer join us. We'll come back. Trustee Shake?
Here, I can hear, and no one's with me.
Trustee Latimer? No one is present. And Chairman DiCarlo?
I am here, I am alone, and I can hear you clearly.
Chairman, I do not detect a physical quorum present. However, a quorum does exist by the inclusion of those members participating by electronic means. In accordance with Tennessee Code 8-44-108, Section B2, I would offer up to the committee the following circumstances for which necessitate the reason for holding this meeting. It is necessary for the Finance Administration Committee meeting of the board to review and approve undergraduate tuition and fees, the proposed salary pool for the fiscal year 25, and to review budget proposals for 24-25 prior to the full Board of Trustees meeting on May 24th. The prompt necessity of this committee's meeting did not provide adequate time for the committee's membership to make necessary arrangements to be physically present for a quorum. For these reasons, I would contend that participation by a quorum of the committee members by electronic or other means of communications is necessary. Chairman, I ask that a motion be made and roll call vote be taken for the determination of the necessity of holding this meeting. An affirmative vote will signify that a necessity does exist for this meeting to proceed. A dissenting vote will signify that a necessity does not exist.
I have a motion for approval.
Make the motion to approve.
Can I have a second?
This is Ron Ramsey. I second.
Dr. Green, will you take the roll, please?
Trustee Allen, Trustee Grisham,
Here.
is that a yes?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, y'all. I'm in a phase. Yes.
Trustee
I'm
Latimer,
today.
yes. Trustee Latimer? Think about hand up. Trustee Ramsey
Aye.
and Chair DiCarlo.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, in addition to committee members, the following trustees are participating in today's meeting. Trustee Stigall Jones, Trustee Fry Clark, Trustee Ayers, and Trustee Ayers. You may
Thank you,
proceed.
Dr. Green, for taking us through that. I know it's difficult, but necessary. With that, why don't go through our first agenda item, Mr. Ross, would you please take us through that?
So yeah, we have a presentation on parking and transportation services today. I'd like to thank everybody for this opportunity to provide the update. I will share that this is part of a master planning process that we've been in, all of us, and the entire campus over the past year. As part of that, whether it's academic buildings, whether it's enrollment, whether it's programs or athletics or housing, the subject that is one that comes up frequently is parking. So based on that, we hired a consultant as part of the process to review our parking and to look at several aspects of it. One, the efficiency, opportunities to enhance comfort, accessibility, convenience. And one of the most important is to maintain our infrastructure as well as our resources. And so as we go forward today, again, I would like to point out that many times when we talk about parking, it quickly moves to how many spaces do you have and how much does it, what's it cost to park? But it's an entire network of transportation. It's our roads, it's our storm drainage, it's our infrastructure, pedestrian ways, lighting, safety, cameras, milling, paving, all of these pieces. We're a small city and it has all of these infrastructure pieces, and that's what this study sought to look at. So I'll move us through the first slide. I will say the first part that became evident in the study is revenue and costs. So this particular slide is revenue, but it became apparent that revenue did not align with costs. It has been over a half a decade since ETSU has raised any parking fees or any revenue opportunities. It's been 6 years. In that same time frame, the cost to maintain, whether it's a parking garage or milling or those pieces, have tripled and in many cases quadrupled. So we did this somewhat intentionally as we went through the pandemic, as we went through uncertain times. We did not raise costs to students. We relied on reserves and other functions. Quickly, if you would just look at the 2023 column, I'll go through revenues. They're somewhat constant. We're at about 2.3 in revenues. Our fixed costs are pretty consistent, as you can see, about $1.4 million. And then our debt service is $1.2 million. We move 5% every year to an R&R account that can be used for any emergencies or unknowns at the end of the year. That leaves parking and transportation with about $144,000 that at the beginning of the year, that's discretionary for maintenance improvements to plan and budget for. This next one is just a map of the parking I wanted to put in here for you to see, but ultimately you begin to see in the center of campus, it's more dense. There are more greenways, pedestrian ways. And if you look to the edge of campus, you see more parking lots, more urban sprawl type of development. And the trend in most universities is as you grow, they fill in, you go more vertical in parking. And we've started to do that as well with 2 parking garages and we're filling in, but it's a snapshot. This next slide, you don't have to read every category. I just want to give you the bullet points to the side. I wanted you to know that the consultants, along with staff, blitzed the campus at 2 o'clock on Tuesday, one of the peak times. And this is what they found, that at that time, over 1,500 parking spaces were empty. Just to give you a snapshot of where was it empty, it wasn't in the parking garage. So I put an arrow here. You can see that it's 95% occupied. But in lots 22, there were over 700 spaces empty. And if I go back, it's these lots here. So at a peak time, all of that sea of asphalt is relatively empty, as well as other spaces as well. So one of the things we're learning is the number of parking spaces. How many we have total is not an issue at ETSU. I'm going to talk about costs quickly, but this is a reserved space comparison, which has changed. I'd like to reiterate as well, in the master plan, it will be presented to the board in September. So everything you see today is fluid. Some of it's in draft mode, and this is as well. We're still attaining more info. But in short, you look at the University of Tennessee, which was at 27,000 students. They're now over 40. They have 95 reserved spaces. What is a reserved space? That could be a clinic space. It could be a service vehicle, but it's also departmental. The Office of X has spaces. At East Tennessee State University, which is far less enrollment, we have 360. So one of the opportunities and recommendations you'll see later is there can be an opportunity to address that and perhaps help ADA accessibility, because those spaces tend to be some of your best spaces. I think this is reflective of the fact we've just had a surplus of spaces. So when people have requested them, we've just allowed them. We didn't have a shortage. This next slide, I won't belabor too much, but it's a fluid document. We're working on it still. But the costs the cost comparisons will show that East Tennessee State University, among our peers in the state, we've yet to find one that's relatively similar, that is cheaper than us. So just for example, Vanderbilt, if you're a graduate student, you pay $540 per semester. If you are actually, today they updated it on their website, it's $885 for staff parking. You can see Appalachian State's $300. This compares to our current fee for students of $140. But I wanted to break it down. We wanted to break it down a little more to the LGIs, some direct comparisons. So MTSU charges a campus access parking fee of $117 per semester. That compares to our $70 per semester. To the right is an annual fee that Tennessee Tech has on their website. So there, again, they have some zones, but ultimately most pay $260. That compares to our annual fee for students of $140. Memphis is a bit more complex. I will point you to the map first. I think the way Memphis is arranged is our future. So if you look in the center core, you don't see a lot of parking spaces, but you do see them along the perimeter frequently. And I would argue it's the master plan is well done here. And that is what most universities are striving to do as they grow, if you have this growth. They have, if you look at they have priority areas. So if you're in the blue, those are a little closer than the yellow, which may be a residence or others live there. But I'll point out a priority student pays $95 per semester. That compares to 74 hours. I don't have the number yet, but they pay a very nice fee as well for parking that's embedded in their fee process. We've requested it and we're trying to get that number. But ultimately, this model financially is what we think is ETSU's next step, that there's a fee-based infrastructure that we all pay, or that would be in a fee, and that the parking could be differently or be optional. Just quickly breaking down some numbers at UTK, just to have some comparisons. They have 1.85 permits per one space for commuters. We have 1.52, so a much better ratio, obviously. Interestingly, though, their faculty and staff are 1.2 permits to one space, and we're 2.27. So there's more to this than just comparison to comparison. All of our staff or faculty do some work remotely? Are they teaching online? But what it indicates, I think, apparently at first, is our students have ample parking, and we are looking at the faculty staff ratio. Again, overall, though, when we look at lots at our peak times, we have available spaces. Quickly going to run through projected revenues, and this is explained a little better in the other slides, but in the spirit of time, if we had an infrastructure fee, it would generate $2.1 million. And then if you look at the permit sales that we will be talking about in a minute, that would be $900,000 and $200,000 respectively. And then there's some small revenue pieces from meters to fines to parking garages, things of that sort. But that would generate almost $3.5 million per year in projected revenues if we move in this direction. Where do we come to that number? The guiding principle was costs. It was not to create a treasure trove or to have parking garages with gold and marble on them. It was to align them with maintenance and costs that we have. So projected costs on the left, this is just parking lots that need paving, is about $700,000. And to the right, this is just some street and road paving that needs to take place. There are other costs as well, again, that aren't embedded in here, but you can see over the next 5 years, that alone is $2 million. And that does not address ongoing costs or safety or technology. Parking garage costs, right now in our maintenance structure, we're zero. So there is no mechanism or a consistent mechanism to say our parking garages have a designated fund for general maintenance. And we estimated $50 per space. Our consultants actually said in most places it's quadruple, 200 to 250, and most agencies suggest that as well. So how did we get to $50? We came to $50 because we're at zero. So we will start And our garages are in relatively good shape. They're relatively new, and the Millennium Garage is newly acquired. So as we have in the recent past got into the garage business, we need to evolve and start planning for future structural work, infrastructure, things of that sort. Quickly want to run through just projections. This is where expenses will go. So obviously these top two are fixed to have expenses, debt service, dollars for paving, sealing, painting, signage, street paving, cameras, and garage maintenance. We took this out 5 years, and then we averaged that 5-year number. And so as we go to the next slide, that 5-year number is right here, $3.287 million. So this is where things are, the consultant and through some financial analysis is being recommended as new. So I'll start at the top. We typically have 9,000 permits picked up in our students. They now will have an option to purchase that permit instead of automatically receiving. If that number holds, which I actually expect it may come down, but we don't know, that's $900,000 in revenue. We're proposing an infrastructure fee for all students at $80. Currently, students pay a parking access and a fee, a total fee of $70 per semester. And we're proposing that move to $80, which brings us to 2.1. And then faculty staff permits, we have 2,100 of those. That fee currently is $80. It would move to $120, which generates $250,000. And then the others are fluid, but relatively constant. That's $3.5 million in revenue. Our consultant recommended that we begin putting in money into reserve for maintenance and for future improvements, such as future parking garages, that we would have money for bonding and things of that sort. And ultimately, when you take that revenue with those expenses, it leaves about $59,000 difference. The recommendations and considerations in the report as it is now, again, it's fluid, it's moving, but the top three are what we are addressing today so that you see that they're separated. The recommendation is that the existing parking fee, access fee, change from $70 to $80, and that is viewed as an infrastructure fee for all of the transportation services, whether it's a trolley, a road, lighting, those types of things. Number two, that there would be an optional parking permit for students at $50 per semester. The feeling is this is more equitable. If you're an international student, you don't have a car, you don't pay this fee. If you're an online student, you don't pay that permit. If you live across the street at Monarch, you could take the trolley. It's optional. And that faculty have always been optional parking permit, but that would move from $80 to $120. So that's the financial piece. Down below are other recommendations and considerations. I won't belabor all of those, but some of these we have a lot of event parking, whether it's athletics or performing arts or museums. At this moment, none of that revenue supports a parking infrastructure. So the report is showing that our faculty, staff, and students are basically supplementing the parking structure for those pieces, and that could be something to be looked at. And if you look down through here, I'll just highlight a few: ADA transportation, trolley expansion, pedestrian ways, building a reserve fund. As you get to the very end of that list, I did want to point out every single student we're working with JC Transit, they can show their ID and actually go anywhere in the city, not just on our trolley service. And then the last one's to be more visitor friendly. So whether it's visitor friendly or maybe you're only taking one class per semester and maybe it meets one day a week, you could have a place or a metered parking spot to go towards. And again, you may not have to purchase a parking permit. Lastly, I wanted to give you two images. This isn't, as we're looking at the future, these circles are just areas in the master planning process that we're looking at for potential garages. And there is work in place looking at what the next 10 years will look like. And then the last slide, this just shows the street in front of Bergen Dosset. Bergen Dosset would be here. Roger Stout Library are all on this end of the street. This is where we have a sea of parking on the other side. But this visual shows what could be, where you wouldn't have this on-street parking where students are cutting through safety issues. You would have crosswalks with accessibility standards, raised plates for those that are visually impaired. You would have bicycling ways, pedestrian ways, and that eventually this connects to West Walnut. But as it sits right now, if you look at this street, it needs to be repaved. If you look at the medians in the middle, they need to be replaced. And that's $900,000 to do that today. This is a potential redesign. But right now, as you saw with our structure, the way it exists, we have $144,000 per year in discretionary dollars. So this can't be repaved. It can't be addressed now in its existing form, much less in a future vision as we're looking at the master plan. So I'll stop talking, answer any questions that anyone may have. Unshare me.
Can things like that redesign of the street be bonded?
I don't think so. I think it potentially what we normally do. So what we normally may not be what it could. A parking garage, or when there's growth, is added revenue, or I think it potentially could, if we could show where the revenue is coming from. It's a possibility.
And so this discussion is the discussion, and you're going to come forward with a proposal when?
Okay.
So as part of the tuition and fee
Oh,
proposal,
okay.
we wanted to put this forward first so that the change in fee could be considered as we go through the proposal.
I got you. Okay, thank you.
Hi, this is Trustee Fry Clark. Just a quick question. For the parking for the students, you indicated that right now the student access fee, that would go from 70 to 80. Is that the current parking fee? Or
Yes.
Okay, so the total would go up $60 a semester. Is that correct for students?
If a student,
If a student chooses to purchase a parking pass in addition?
Correct.
Okay,
correct.
thank you.
And Christy, when you go over the numbers later, just point out where these, because this is the point being this is a $60 increase, and you don't consider this mandatory fees, correct?
The $50 would not be mandatory. The $80 infrastructure fee is part of the program service fee and is part of our recommendation for today.
And that's just a $10 increase on the mandatory.
Correct,
Mhm.
correct. Mhm.
Exactly.
And I have a question on the trolleys. I'm on the Appalachian State campus quite a bit, and they have, these little shelter places where the kids are waiting on the trolley. How often would you foresee a trolley coming to like some of these further out parking spots? And, what would the route be? And do the kids know that already? I mean, are they at the peak whenever classes start? It's 15 minutes before, 10 minutes before. How does that work?
So right now, particularly like in lot 21, where that's on the perimeter, they run every 15 minutes. And so there's multiple routes. And again, there's a link to JC Transit. So yes, there are places, again, the trolley, we're looking at the whole system. We keep very good data on that as well. So we know if we ran this at 7 o'clock at night that we have 2 riders, or we have, 300. So we try to adjust those routes, locations, and times. But ultimately during the day when there's classes and it's every 15 minutes.
Well, I would think that the city of Johnson City would be excited about having both faculty and students getting on a trolley for the new West Walnut corridor and all of the wonderful restaurants downtown. That really helps congestion in general. And we all know there's no parking in downtown Johnson City either. So if we could become a more focused, trolley friendly, do a wonderful story collaboration or, some way to let even our guests that want to come to games that, maybe can't walk very far, how easy it is now to come to a football game or, wherever you're having. I think that might be something useful to continue to think about.
I think so. And I think what you're describing will grow in our future. It's here now, but I think the mentality is car centered, but I do think this optional fee, I don't know how many people will pay that or not, because if the trolley services work, and if I have to pay and I'm in Monarch or I'm at University's Edge and it's $50 per semester or $100, there will be a significant number of people say, I don't want to pay that. So I will either walk, or I'll take the trolley, or I'll ride my bicycle. And part of this is hoping that people don't buy a permit, which affects revenue, but the hope is that they don't bring their car. It's less congestion, less car hunting. It's one step towards that.
Jimmy, a question just on comps, and thank you for the material that you've presented. It gives a sense not only of revenue and expenditure challenges coupled with a significant increase in cost, but a sense around issues related to accessibility. Could you give a little bit of an overview of some of the things that you have done this year and that you have planned for next year to address some of the accessibility challenges across campuses during the period of construction we're moving through?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that question. It's interesting when we talk about accessibility. It's very easy to say, where's my parking space, and is it right? How close is it to where an individual user goes? But ADA and accessibility is a much larger piece. And when you say ADA, you're looking at more compliance in laws. So what I will say with the first thing people ask is, how, do you have enough spaces? Are they in convenient places? So we have, because of construction, it has a disruption to everyone on campus, but we're particularly aware and concerned that is exacerbated for someone with any type of impairment or immobility. So we have repurposed spaces. We intend to repurpose more in some lots, particularly if students tend to park there with the residence halls. Kind of hard to paint them and restrike them while they're there. But we have a few more weeks left, and we have a plan to repurpose ADA spots. But in addition to this, we're doing things that it's not enough. My first message to people is to say, I'm going to meet the law and compliance for ADA spots is not even close to acceptable in my mind. Give you some examples. We can't control who gets an ADA permit. I can't control if someone says, my grandmother's disabled, but I have a permit, but she's not with me today and I'm going to use it. We can't control misabuse, who gets permits, and those pieces, and we can't control the terrain that easily in East Tennessee. We've done extra things that are not required, like a trolley service for our students. They can now call or text, and they can be picked up from anywhere and most likely taken to their front door. We've had some ADA projects in buildings. We've changed slopes of sidewalks, curb cuts, raised plates, railings, elevator enhancements, and we're looking at the whole experience for disability in these pieces. So we apply for ADA money every year from the state, and when we receive those funds, we vigorously make those improvements.
Thank you.
This might kind of be a crazy thought, but I'm just thinking out of the box on some of the things I've seen here in Florida too. And they have these really long electric golf carts. And I think sometimes, they pick up people and it's free, but other times it's almost like an Uber. And I don't know if ETSU could create its own like Uber account too, as far as taking off campus or using an electric vehicle on campus. The vehicle is pinged, right? So kind of where the closest one is, and you call it like a Uber. I don't know if there could be some sort of program interesting to have one of those, 10-seater electric golf carts running around, because I know when I'm at games, I know people love to flag down the golf cart and hop on right then instead of waiting at a certain place for a certain time. And I don't even know if that's possible, but of course they're a lot more narrow than a big old trolley. So maybe a different type of vehicle might be interesting if it were affordable. So just throwing that out there.
No, I appreciate that. And I do know it's not a crazy idea. We're actually looking at that and studying that specific. I don't know about an Uber, but it could be that technology. What happens is what they're doing now is to say, how far are people walking? So a lot of students in the master plan process said, I'll let you follow me. I'll give you permission to follow me on my phone. So right now we're tracking where people park, how far they walk, and where these hot zones are. That will let us know if you have a very large campus or it's spread out and you have to go 20 minutes to your next class, you definitely would want to jump on one of these. If typically people are walking 3 or 4 minutes in between buildings, it's probably not worth the effort. So it's not a crazy idea. I think studying those habits that we're still collecting that data on will probably direct us, but we do have some carts now. We use them, and that's a potential.
Any other questions or comments? I guess I have one last comment. When does it go into effect, the $50 parking fee
It would be for the fall.
for the fall? And how do you plan to handle the communication issue if approved?
Well, we have to have, it's a different process for students in a bit, but in the sense that now they have an option, they have to purchase it and receive this. But we intend, I think, to use the same method that we've used with faculty and staff. Communicate with students in the same way. Here's how you can collect your permit. It's online now. You put in your driver's license, and we're going to work with student affairs as well. We certainly know that communication has to come out. We're going to that plan's not completely developed, Mr. DiCarlo, but we think with the way we've had it with faculty and staff, that similar processes, similar communications will work with the students as well.
I guess what I'm saying is you're doing an analysis to show that ESU is under market, and when the students see the charge, they want to have that analysis and will believe it's just my words, a money grab, when it's really a realization of what it takes. And that's what I mean by communication process.
No, I misunderstood your question. I thought you meant how would we implement it. So as far I'll tell you what we've done so far, and then we'll move forward with this is through these processes, we've met with Student Government Association pieces. In fact, they've been to town halls, looking not just at what the costs are now, but future parking garages, what it is they want, how much it costs. So they're aware. We've actually presented to student groups, everything from honors college, Roan scholars, to classrooms, to student groups as well. Faculty Senate, we've had a presentation. We've had a series of those. And it's been very, very clear that the costs for parking have not risen. Inflation has taken place, and that there will be increased costs. What I will tell you, the response to that communication is everyone says we completely understand that now. I have not had anyone say this is fantastic and I love to pay more, but they understand that piece. And I think from here, we move forward with more definitive, here are the numbers and where we're moving forward.
Well, my point is when this comes out, it's not a gotcha moment. It has been communicated in some discussions on campus.
I don't think so. I mean, Joe's with the students more, and Kimberly could comment, but they are expecting, in my mind, increased costs. Now, we have 13,500, 14,000 students. How many of them have, completely read everything and paid attention? I don't know, but there have been efforts.
Well, I know when I was a student, I didn't read everything and pay attention. So, okay, well, thank you. Any other questions?
No, and honestly, I think the $10, they'll never notice. They won't. It's the $50 is what's going to change their,
Exactly.
Right.
Just had a quick comment / question. I do think it's a big deal. Like the $10 will not get noticed, but that 50, I mean, we can't undermine the fact that, it's gonna hit a little different. I mean, because previously you just had a hidden fee. No one really acknowledges that you're paying a parking fee. You just go and pick up your parking tag. But now, as much as you're calling it optional for most students, it's not going to be an optional thing that are, coming to campus. So, just paying that $50 fee is not going to be a light thing if there's not a communication plan to go with that. I mean, because the one big thing I heard is parking spaces. You said we had 700 parking spaces in those lots across from the CPA fields, but that doesn't always, saying that we have parking spaces doesn't always go together with, yeah, but we also need $50 more for permits. Because the big thing is generally spacing. So if you're saying that we have more parking spaces, we have all these extra parking spaces, that's usually a big thing that's asked about. And then you're also saying we need $50 more. I mean, that's a concerning question that's going to come up, and people are going to have to pay that up front. It's not going to be like under the belt or just hidden amongst all the fees.
I agree. Any added costs are, and we're aware of that. And what I will say is that's also why the fees haven't increased in 6 years. And it's also why we relied on reserves. And so we're at a point, where the reserves that we've had in parking are gone and the revenue has to match. I will also say, I don't know that the two necessarily correlate, except that if you have surplus spaces, you still have to maintain them. There's a cost to that.
And that's what I was going to mention as well. The $50 additional fee is not to add additional parking spaces or closer parking spaces. It's simply to maintain what we have currently, because we have underfunded that piece and need to make sure that they're up to standards and they're safe for our students and our faculty and staff.
And there's the infrastructure is pretty, if you want to just take a look, walk out in front of Bergen Dosset, the medians need to be addressed now, the roads do. This is not about new.
Mm-hmm.
I have one other question. I'm sorry if I may have missed it already being brought up, but on dorms and people that live in residence, what percentage of students would you say have a car that live in the dorms?
I don't know, Jeff, do you know that? We have about 3,000 beds. How many have a car? I don't know. But I think, Linda, you're moving to that next step, which I think is phase 2 for us. Where should those commuter and non-commuter park? That is absolutely, I think, step 2. We didn't go there today. I will say there's a luxury to say park where you want if you have this permit. We're going to keep that for a while, but I think that's the next step is someone who parks their car here permanently. Where should that lot be? And
right, because obviously they can get the premier spaces at night when they come in. And so if they're taking up, a spot when they're going to just walk from their dorm room to their class the next day, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. So I'm glad you're going to be looking at that as well in the future.
Correct. Well said.
And Jeremy, just to try to wrap up on process, in some respects, the process and the action on fees are not altogether 100% aligned. So for the board's visibility, many of the questions that you're raising related to access, related to location, related to trolleys, all of that will come to you in a formal and complete package this fall when we present the master plan to you. It's just simply because of the timing of the fee action. Unless we took some steps today, we would miss yet another year as it relates to fees if we did not take any action until after you saw the master plan in the fall. So while we may not have all the answers for your questions today, these will inform the work that we bring to you for September. But as Jeremy noted, that the revenue challenges are still real. And as the chair noted, we still will have among the lowest parking rates of any public university in the state of Tennessee, even if these fees are approved by the board.
Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments? Okay, I think we can move on to the next agenda item. So I think we're going to go through the tuition and mandatory fees, right? Christy?
That is correct. Thank you. Good morning. We actually have quite a bit to go through today. So that includes the proposed tuition and mandatory fees for undergraduate, graduate, and the College of Pharmacy. We're also going to consider the continuation of the fixed price for the online master's in public administration. In addition to the tuition rates, we'll present the proposal for the salary pools, which aligns with the governor's recommendation, and discuss the spring estimated and July proposed budgets. We're going to begin with the proposed tuition and mandatory fees. Today, I'm presenting the recommended tuition and mandatory fees for the 24-25 academic year. It is essential for thoughtful and deliberate consideration about the impact prior to recommending a tuition and mandatory fee increase. We consider the level of state support. THEC's model for fiscal year 25 was built on flat enrollment with a 4% outcomes growth and inflationary adjustment. That equals 1.2 million. Governor Lee's proposed budget for an expenditure increase and partially funded 3% salary pool was $5 million. We also consider the total cost of attendance. Last year, tuition and fees increased by 2.85%. We also looked at a comparison of tuition and mandatory fees with other state universities, which will show that ETSU is consistent with this year's average for state universities. We are also engaged in ongoing analysis of all units across the university to identify areas to improve services, reduce costs, or allow assets to be used more effectively for students. I know that you all are familiar with a lot of the initiatives that we're taking in that area. We also must consider THEC's binding tuition and mandatory fee ranges. THEC proposed a 0 to 4% tuition and mandatory fee limit at their November 2023 meeting. The commission is projected to vote on the binding limits at their May meeting. Other factors we considered are projected student enrollment, university enrollment goals, market and cost factors for higher education. The Higher Education Price Index shows that inflation for colleges and universities rose 4.5% for fiscal year 2023. Remember that percentage, we'll come back to that here shortly. We are proposing a 3.8% increase in total tuition and mandatory fees for all classes of undergraduate students on the main campus. That is a 4.15% increase in tuition and 2.4% in fees, for a total increase to the full-time undergraduate student of $165 per semester for tuition and $24 per semester for fees. It's our understanding that THEC will propose a 0 to 4% tuition and mandatory fee increase for undergraduate students for the upcoming year. The tuition increases over the past 5 years have included 2 years at 0%. We are recommending an additional $15 increase for new border state students and a similar percentage increase for out-of-state and graduate tuition. Assuming flat enrollment, this should result in an increase in revenue of $4.2 million. This will help fund ETSU's portion of the salary pool of $2.2 million, as well as increased benefit cost, faculty tenure and promotion, and other inflationary increases. The mandatory fee increase includes a $10 increase for our Center for Physical Activity and $4 for operational costs at our post office. The increase for this, what we call the CPA, was driven primarily by the SGA, and the $4 for the post office, there hasn't been an increase there in 10 years. So the other $10, as Jeremy discussed in our first agenda item, is the change to the current parking fee, moving that to an infrastructure fee, and then introducing the optional parking pass for students. Tuition for ETSU, as I said before, did not increase 2 out of the past 4 years. The overall increase requested is 3.8%. If you look at that in comparison to this current year's tuition rates at state institutions, you will see that the undergraduate tuition and fees of $10,328 still puts us right at the average for state institutions. You can see that UT Knoxville has the highest and TSU has the lowest tuition on that list. We're asking today for approval of the tuition and mandatory fee rates as shown on page 7 in your agenda items. Once this committee approves tuition and fees, staff will provide notice to the campus of the proposed tuition and mandatory fee increase for the 24-25 academic year. In compliance with the Tennessee Tuition Transparency and Accountability Act, Tennessee Code Annotated 49-7-1603, this public notice will be posted for 15 days. The full board will take action on tuition and mandatory fees during its May 24th meeting. Are there any questions on the tuition and fee proposal?
Any questions or comments? Well, hearing none, I think we need a motion of approval.
So moved.
I need a second, please.
I second.
Any discussion? With that, Dr. Green, will you take a roll call vote?
Yes, sir. Trustee Allen, trustee Grisham,
Aye.
trustee Latimer,
Aye.
trustee Ramsey,
Aye.
Chair DeCarlo.
Aye.
Passes.
And just let me comment for a second. Look, none of us want to do things like this, but I do think that not only is the board, but the university and the faculty and the administration are really good stewards of the money. And obviously, I've been watching this now for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. And the zeros do ultimately catch up with you. But I thought we did a good job maintaining the zeros when it was appropriate. Nobody likes to increase anything, but inflation is a factor and compensation is a factor. So I would just commend the staff for the work they do to not only communicate, but to, hold the line where possible.
Well said, Steve.
I think, Christy, we're going to go on to the pharmacy tuition discussion.
Correct. So we're going to look at the Gatton College of Pharmacy tuition rate proposal. Last year, because of the historic state appropriation for the Gatton College of Pharmacy, we were able to lower tuition rates and created in-state and out-of-state rates. We are recommending to hold those rates for academic year 25 to continue to minimize cost and promote affordability for our largely underserved population. The college will rely on reserves and minimizing operational expenses to balance their budget while continuing to pursue additional assistance from the state. We are asking for approval to hold the Gatton College of Pharmacy rates to their current levels for FY25. Are there any questions on the College of Pharmacy tuition proposal?
Any questions or comments?
My comment is congratulations to all the pharmacy students that had that amazing pass rate on their exams. And it's obvious that the pharmacy school is doing really well. I'm proud of them.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Any other comments? With that, can I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
A second, please.
I second.
Dr. Green, can you take a roll call vote?
Yes, sir. Trustee Allen, trustee Grisham,
Aye.
trustee Latimer,
Aye.
trustee Ramsey,
Aye.
Chairman DeCarlo.
Aye.
It's unanimous.
Okay, Christy, you're up again. Fixed price on online masters in public administration tuition.
Y'all are going to get tired of hearing from me. So let's get to the right. Maybe. The Board of Trustees approved a fixed price model for the launch of a fully online Master's in Public Administration in the fall of 2021. This model fixed the tuition and mandatory fee rate for each cohort for 3 years. The college requests approval to continue a fixed price tuition model for the next 3 academic years. The rate proposed considers the increase to graduate tuition approved earlier and increases the rate to $600 per credit hour for the next 3 new student cohorts for the purpose of recruiting and growing the program. The model includes components of tuition at $507, program fee at $33, a course fee at $10, and an online fee of $50, which creates that $600 flat rate. We are asking for approval to maintain the fixed price model for academic years 24-25 through academic year 26-27 at the increased rate as listed in your agenda items on page 9.
Any questions or comments or?
No, I like Dr. Latimer said, we need to stay consistent and competitive so we can bring students to ETSU. So I think you guys are doing an excellent, I guess it's just the right thing to do so that we can get more students, but also maintain the ones that we have. Don't want students to walk out of the door with a lot of debt. So I think you guys have done a wonderful job in being consistent with tuition.
Thank you, Dorothy. Any other comments?
Yeah, how does this tuition on this online program compare across the nation? Is it really competitive? I mean, where are we falling with the online MPA? And really in all our online courses, are we like middle of the pack, very, very value-based?
Dr. McCorkle, can I throw that question over to you?
Sure, I'm happy to start. Dr. Latimer, we recently took a really close look at the MBA program in particular to compare where we were with our peer competitors, because I think, as the board knows, we've recently partnered with an online program marketing company to assist us in drawing and improving the enrollment in the MBA program. And we're quite competitive with others, particularly in our region. I think what helps in the case of the MPA, which has just been presented, is having a flat rate tuition helps in marketing the program to students because they know exactly how much the costs are. And in many ways, it makes the program even more competitive to be very clear about the total cost. But our online programs, a recent analysis that we did, are competitive. I think this board's also aware we recently have done that with pharmacy so that we can report to the General Assembly about where we are with our tuition. But we continue to look at that. We're actually conducting an analysis now specifically in our master's programs to determine and ensure that we are competitive in the fields where we know that there's potential for growth as well. I'll mention about the MPA program, one of the important things is that we want to work towards receiving NASPA accreditation in this program, which I think it's the gold mark, the gold standard, and we hope that will help us drive enrollment. And so this is one part of being able to do that, to ensure that we've got competitive tuition, a high quality program, and that it's online accessible for those who are working professionals.
I know you market a lot on social media, which I think is so appropriate, especially for adult learners. Are you getting more people that have already been at ETSU and within a couple of years are enrolling in this type? Or are you finding that there are not only adult learners, maybe locally, but even nationally and internationally, that are starting to see this on the social media site?
We've certainly seen that with the MBA. We recently had a check-in with our partners who demonstrated to us that we have a lot of out-of-state folks who have been interested in the program. We're still primarily drawing from the region, and I assume those to be working professionals. That's what they've heard, especially for programs like this that help build credentials for those who are already in the workforce. But I think this program will give us an opportunity to draw more attendees from outside the region.
Do many of the companies step up to say, we'll pay for our employees to attend and get their degrees?
I think some have, particularly with the MBA. I think there's more opportunity we could do locally. We've had some discussions about the MPA in particular to have local employers assist in supporting their students through this program. But I think there's more opportunity for us to connect so that those employers know the value to support their students or their employees through a program like this.
Great, thank you.
Other discussion? Hearing none, can I have a motion for approval?
I move that we approve.
Second,
Second,
Dr. Green, if you could take a roll call?
Yes, sir. Trustee Allen, trustee Grisham,
Aye.
trustee Latimer.
Aye.
Trustee Ramsey,
Aye.
Chairman DeCarlo.
Aye,
It's unanimous.
thank you. Christie, you want to take us through the approval of the salary pools for fiscal year 25?
I will. The governor presented his budget proposal to the General Assembly on February 5th. This proposal included a recommendation of a 3% salary pool. The state historically funds 55% of the salary pool, and the rest comes from other institutional resources. A 3% pool for the main campus will require approximately $5 million to fund. The governor's proposed budget includes 2.8 million of increased resources as the state portion. The remaining 2.2 million will need to come from other resources or efficiencies. With the uncertainty of fall enrollment, management is recommending including the full 3% salary pool in the budget, but delaying the implementation until November when fall enrollment is certain. This is the same strategy that was implemented for the current fiscal year. Management is also looking at how the pool will be distributed, looking at gaps in pay for some positions, and an emphasis on bringing salaries to market rates. Any questions about the proposed salary pool? One thing I do want to mention is that we are, with the implementation of Voyager, and Dr. Nolan might want to comment a little bit more on it, that we are going through a class and comp analysis for our positions, and there will be a change as we go into Voyager. Jeremy, did you want to add anything to that?
Not particularly,
So,
that's accurate.
Christie, I'll thank you, and I'll follow up on your comment. So for visibility for members of the board, what we're requesting is that you direct the staff to set this pool of resources aside, and that the 3% will go towards what have typically been across the board salary enhancements for faculty and staff. Concurrently, as we move through the transition to Oracle, we will adjust salary ranges, job families, and scales, the result which will indicate the opportunity for salary adjustments for staff across the institution. We recognize the gaps that continue to exist on the faculty side of the equation. So as we move through fall and we have internal budget hearings on campus next week, the top question that we are asking all the deans and unit directors is, how are you prioritizing opportunities for efficiencies to deepen enhancements in salaries above and beyond this 3% pool? So as we go through campus budget hearings and we have a sense of enrollment in the fall, we'll come back to you with additional information about the 3% and the potential to make enhancements above and beyond if revenues are presented.
I just have one quick question, or I guess it's more so a comment. First of all, Dr. Nolan, thank you for addressing that staff are still being considered, and that hopefully their salaries will continue to improve closer to living wage in this region. The comment though, and I think you started kind of talking about this a little bit with faculty salaries, has more to do with salary compression and the issue of salary compression that still exists on campus and is getting worse. Really every time we do an across the board raise, even with a cap, it actually makes the compression worse. Unless you're making, like, for example, this past year, over $165,000 a year, which is not the majority of our faculty here at ETSU. It again is making the compression worse among faculty. So again, I appreciate the work that you're doing, and I know that it's not going ignored, but I just wanted to bring that point up. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments or questions? Can I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second,
A second.
Dr. Green, if we could take a roll call?
Yes, sir. Trustee Allen, trustee Grisham,
Aye.
trustee Latimer,
Aye.
trustee Ramsey,
Aye.
Chairman DeCarlo.
Aye.
Unanimous.
You. And I think the last point, Christy, you're going to take us through the spring estimated and July proposed budgets.
Correct. And it is our last agenda item. We have rolled in the assumptions we presented earlier to a preliminary budget that we are presenting as informational and will be discussed further at the May board meeting. We have included the 3.8% tuition and mandatory fee increase, as well as the 3% salary pool. We've also included the governor's recommended state appropriations amount into the preliminary budget. As stated earlier, the state budget and the binding tuition rate will not be confirmed until May. We're in the process of conducting budget hearings. They should be completed next week. The main campus budget has revenue exclusive of auxiliary increasing July to July by 4.7%. The primary increases are tuition revenue increasing by 4.2 million, state appropriations increasing by 5.1 million, and interest revenue increasing by 2.4 million. Auxiliary revenue is budgeted to increase over 6 million. Tuition and mandatory fees equate to 46% of total revenue. But state appropriations, they provide 37% of total revenue, excluding auxiliaries. Expenses are budgeted to increase by 4.9% of the 12 points. Let's see, you can see that right here. The 12.7 million increase in expenses, 5 million is salary. 2 million is an increase in benefits and taxes. 1.5 million is the creation of a base budget for the Martin Center, which also has a corresponding increase in revenue, which leaves about 1.5% increase to cover other inflationary increases. The reason I asked you to remember that 4.5% higher education price index increase is if you compare that 4.5% to the 1.5% we have left, you'll see that that tuition increase and those fee increases are necessary to maintain operations. We are not increasing our headcount. We have adjusted some positions, but remained flat on our headcount. We are increasing 2 in auxiliaries, and really that's just moving someone from a part-time, I think it was 90% up to 100%. So it's really not an increase in headcount. It's just changing them to the full-time status. Expenses by function for the main campus. As you can see, instruction and student services are a large component. Academic support is a large component. Last year, instruction was 40%, so it stayed fairly constant. All the categories have stayed pretty consistent. Actually, let me go back and see if there's any questions on the main campus budget before we move to the College of Medicine. Hearing none, we will move on to the Quillen College of Medicine budget. Although the College of Medicine does expect tuition revenue to increase by approximately 700,000, the revenue is decreasing due to a reduction of budgeted resident revenue. The expenses are decreasing due to a decrease in graduate medical education salaries and benefits. Again, instruction is the main category, as well as academic support.
What did you say about the resident budget?
On the, there was a, and Margaret, I might have to pull you into this one. There was a change in the resident revenue. I believe it moved over to, was it family medicine? Yeah. So it reduced in the College of Medicine budget.
Okay, but we didn't reduce resident slots. It was just moved over to family medicine.
No, correct. Yes.
Thank you.
That's correct, Dr. Latimer. It was a transfer of those funds. There was no reduction in resident slots. And there also hasn't been significant changes in the revenue flow passing through from the state now through ballot onto the institution to support the operations of the residency programs. This is just a redistribution of those lines.
Great, thank you.
Family medicine has their revenue increasing by nearly 10%. So we've just, and the correlating expenses are also increasing approximately 9.5%, due primarily to personnel costs. Again, by function, instruction, academic support is the main categories. Here. On College of Medicine, Family Medicine, are there any questions that I can answer on their operating budget? The College of Pharmacy's revenue is similar to the estimated spring budget. This does reflect a flat amount of state appropriations and no tuition increase. The increased expenses are for accreditation purposes, and the difference will come from the college's reserves. As with the other professional colleges, instruction and academic support are the main categories of expenses within this college as well. Are there any questions on the operating budgets? And this was a discussion item only, so.
Thank you for that, Christy. Appreciate everything you did there. Any other business? Or any discussion items that anyone would like to present? Hearing none, Dr. Green, I assume we can adjourn the meeting.
Yes, sir. And I'll let you all know when we are no longer live.
Motion to adjourn. Ending the stream. Make sure this goes off here in just